After 4 years apart, I'm considering reaching out to my ex to apologize, realizing I was the problem in our marriage. Can it be too late? This may be an extended read, so here we go. I encountered my former wife when I was 20, and she was 22. That year, I purchased a house and began renting out bedrooms to friends. She eventually moved in with me shortly after because she was spending most of her time at my place and was paying for an apartment she rarely used. After a year, we grew tired of having roommates and decided we wanted it to be just the two of us in the house. We were in a relationship for approximately 5 years before getting married. Shortly after our wedding, we had 2 children and remained married for about 7 years. Our marriage was not flawless, which one is, as I was a highly functional alcoholic throughout our relationship and also a significant cannabis user. My former wife did not drink or smoke at all. In fact, she found it quite distasteful but tolerated my habits. By 2018, I had developed symptoms of carpal tunnel syndrome, which woke me in the middle of the night due to extreme numbness in my right arm, making it hard for me to fall back asleep. I often went to bed intoxicated most nights, so the rest I managed to get was hardly restorative. I quickly recognized that if I overused my right arm during the day, the numbness at night would be particularly bothersome. Gradually, I began to abandon my healthy hobbies, such as cycling, woodworking, playing guitar, and even walking my dog, because I feared it would result in lost sleep that night. Instead, I ended up sitting around drinking more, and my only hobby became growing cannabis in the basement. This behavior led my former wife to distance herself from me, understandably so, as I was a deplorable husband. Although I was never abusive, rather, I considered myself a jovial drunk. The scent of alcohol and my slurred speech were definitely turn-offs for someone who does not drink. I sought medical treatment for my carpal tunnel, but the process was excruciatingly slow. As 2019 rolled in, the COVID-19 pandemic struck. My wife and I were essential workers, so we continued to work. Our children were 5 and 3 at the time, and daycares were in disarray. The world was incredibly chaotic, and my stress levels were at an all-time high. Once again, I turned to alcohol to cope. The medical system was so overwhelmed that my carpal tunnel issue seemed trivial in comparison to other pressing concerns. I was an emotional wreck and received no affection from my wife. She was likely just as stressed as I was, in addition to dealing with me and our children. We also had very different approaches to parenting our young ones, which caused frequent conflicts, particularly concerning our bedtime routines. During this period, one of my coworkers, a 39-year-old woman, became quite close to me. She was single and had 5 children of her own, and she romanticized the single life. She was responsible for everything in her household and didn't have to argue with anyone about anything. She also drank heavily, and I confided in her about numerous issues I was having at home. I would complain about how my wife seemed perpetually annoyed with me, regardless of my actions, and I felt unappreciated for all that I contributed. I paid all the bills. The only expense my wife had was groceries, and she still struggled not to accrue credit card debt. This was frustrating for me. I attempted to assist my wife several times by refinancing my house to eliminate her debts, but she would reinvest it all in a multi-level marketing company, sinking even more money into it. Instead of discussing my feelings with my wife, I began to harbor resentment towards her. My coworker would just listen and tell me that I deserved much better than how I was being treated, and that I should not accept the situation. We grew close, exchanging Snapchat messages almost every evening. I never concealed this friendship from my wife. She did not seem to mind. Initially, it felt innocent. We would send pictures of our drinks toasting each other and share videos of us engaging in various activities with our children. At that point, I believed she was the ideal partner for me, despite her having 5 children, and I felt I had settled with my wife. In January 2021, I informed my wife that I no longer wanted to be with her. I preferred being alone. The way she regarded me and her lack of financial responsibility was no longer acceptable, and I had reached my limit. I wished to keep my house and share parenting responsibilities equally for the kids. This revelation devastated my former wife, as she was completely caught off guard. We never went to court to address any matters. We simply mutually agreed on a schedule for the children, and that was the extent of it. In February 2021, I began a relationship with that coworker. Whenever I was not at home with my kids, I was at her place drinking and spending time with her children. She treated me exceptionally well. She quickly recognized that my carpal tunnel was affecting me, made countless phone calls, and firmly pursued obtaining a surgery date for me. I was astonished by how swiftly she managed to arrange that for me. I started sleeping better, and I fell in love with her. That was something my former wife would never have done. Our personalities meshed wonderfully, and I relished spending all my free time with her. My former wife did not take long to find a new partner who also had 5 kids. She moved in with him and blended our children with his, starting a new family. I believed that it would have been chaotic and confusing for my kids had I done the same. Transitioning from a small family to having 2 families with 10 new siblings could easily lead them to feel lost in the shuffle. Thus, I did not rush into merging lives with my new girlfriend. She also agreed that it would not be beneficial for my children's well-being. Therefore, during my time with them, I remained home and focused entirely on the kids. At some stage in 2023, my girlfriend decided to stop drinking to be a more positive role model for her children. I was very proud of her and wanted to follow suit. I was still drinking daily around her, but she was unconcerned. By New Year 2024, I resolved to quit drinking as well. It had been detrimental to my health, and I wanted to set a better example for my children. I managed to go 10 out of 12 months in 2024 without drinking. I did relapse during the summer. I felt fantastic. I lost a significant amount of weight. My sleep improved, and my eating habits became healthier. I gradually recognized that I could resume all my hobbies without the anxiety of losing sleep that night. I saved a considerable amount of money and was much happier. I also reflected deeply on how I ended things with my wife and came to the realization that I was likely to blame for the dissolution. I was the reason my former wife distanced herself from me. I was immensely depressed and in a terrible mental space during an extraordinarily tumultuous period globally, and I made a hasty and, quite possibly, poor decision by leaving her. For reasons I do not fully understand, during this period, I sensed that my girlfriend was growing distant from me. I was uncertain if it was due to my self-improvement efforts and newfound self-esteem or some other factor, but it was clear that our relationship was no longer thriving. We both desired more than a part-time relationship and felt unable to unite our families. Her oldest child had just become a parent, so her home now housed 7 individuals depending on her, 5 children, a baby's mother, and a grandchild, leaving her overwhelmed and unwilling to take on 2 more children in the mix. Shortly after the new year in 2025, she ended our relationship, stating we were both wasting time and that I should seek out someone else who could meet my needs, as she believed I deserved better than her. She wished to focus on her family and could not accomplish that while I was present during my time without my kids. I understood her reasoning, but it stung. She was perfect for me, yet our situations were entirely incompatible. My former wife confides in her friends at work about how much she dislikes her current boyfriend and expresses a desire to leave him. My children claim they dislike going to her house, indicating she isn't happy now. Perhaps she feels trapped. We maintain a civil relationship, but any communication is strictly about our children, usually lasting no more than 2 minutes during our weekly exchanges. I have considered sending her an email to apologize for how I left. I was in an extremely dark place at that time, and my judgment was completely clouded by alcohol, sleep deprivation, being involved with another woman, and the stresses of the pandemic. I recognize why she pushed me away with disdain. Instead of striving to improve my circumstances, I ran away to find solace where I should not have. I do not expect forgiveness or a second chance. I merely want her to understand that she was not to blame. I was, and she did not deserve the way I treated her. I deeply regret not pursuing therapy with her and not giving her the opportunity to address her financial responsibilities. I abruptly chose to end our relationship, and that was not fair to her or our children. I simply wish to express my feelings about it now since I never truly did so when I left. I do not even require a response. I just feel she should hear that she is not the awful wife I portrayed her to be. I no longer drink or use cannabis. I do not cultivate it in the basement, so my house does not constantly reek of it, which my former wife loathed. I genuinely believe I have become the person my former wife deserved to be with. Part of me feels that I would not be who I am today had I not taken this particular path, regrettable as that sounds. It feels accurate. I am uncertain if it is too late to reconcile with my former wife, but I would like to attempt to reunite our family unit. Our children are now 9 and 7 and often express that they wish I had remained living with their mother. I realize that it is entirely selfish for me to consider this, especially given her role as a stepmother to 5 other children. I understand the consequences of my choices and acknowledge that I must cope with them. This is the first time in my adult life that I have been single, and I am finally prioritizing my well-being. I am unsure whether I should leave everything as it is or attempt to change the current situation. Is 4 years too long to seek reconciliation? Thank you for reading. I know I am far from perfect, and I would appreciate any advice you may have for me. Feel free to tell me how terrible I am as well. TLDR, is 4 years too long to attempt to reconcile with my former wife?